Hello chess family, it's me, National Master Jesse James, and today we're going over a fun endgame I got to play against International Master. And well, the point of this lesson, or game review, is to talk about the transition into endgames and how to make the correct decisions and coming up with plans. This is an International Master. He did blunder a pawn in this endgame, which allowed me to go ahead and, well, start winning further and further. But against strong players, you must have the correct plans, because if you don't, they're going to be able to transition maybe into drawish kind of endgames. They'll definitely create counterplay against you, and don't forget, time is typically a factor in games. So if you can't find the right ideas in time, we're either going to be forcing wins against you, or maybe even draws, just because you can't make a plan. So in this game, my opponent just played bishop over to h6. I'm playing the black side against a International Master at 2471, not a bad rating. And well, they are playing very aggressive here. And when my opponent plays a little too aggressive, they love the middle game and they want to attack, I think it's a good idea to transpose or go into an end game. Let's test their end game skills. I really don't like this attack anyways against me, so I went ahead and played queen to h5. By all means, I do not think that queen h5 is the best move in the position, but like I said, I want to go to end game here and test my opponent to see how good the end game is. So, queen trade. This is pretty much forced, or else they're going to be losing their bishop. Knight takes on h5, bishop takes, and here I play for the endgame, king takes on g7. Remember, in the endgame, the king should rush toward the center. And here my opponent went ahead and played knight to d5. A nice move to bring the knight to the center, and as you can see here, the knight is threatening knight c7, forking the rooks. And already here, we got to start planning. What is the best move here? Here, I went ahead and played rook to b8. And some people may not understand this idea, but here, we got to, like I said, create the plan. Here, I have 2 pawns versus the 3 pawns. What's that mean? Well, here, what I want to do is maybe trade off these pawns, and then if I can trade off 2 pawns for, let's say, the 3 pawns, they will be left with an isolated pawn. Now, this isolated pawn can become a pass pawn, but hey, you got to make some kind of plans in the position. So that was my plan. I'm looking to probably get some kind of counterplay on the queen side. Very typical in the English. Also, I got to get this bishop out whenever I do get the opportunity. Here, my opponent was a little too aggressive here and played pawn to g4. Happy to see that. The knight jumped back to f6. And here he took on f6 because, well, he didn't want to retreat here, so he takes. And here is already the first question. Should we take with the pawn or take with the king here? I know a lot of people would have some interesting ideas here, but keep it simple. The simple move here is king takes on f6. I know it looks weird, but to play e takes on f6, it does open up the rook, but it does give you the weakness of what's called the isolated pawn. You don't want this. There's 3 different types of pawn weaknesses. You can see that the pawn now becomes weak. The rook will slide over. White is definitely better in this position. So simple chess. King takes on f6. And here, rook after d1 makes sense. The rook comes to the open file. I played pawn to d6 here. And here my opponent blundered by playing knight to d4 here. And here white was trying to get very active, but it turns out they just gave me all the activity. So now I'm going to be able to grab the pawn, but again, the transition is what's important. It's not enough just to win a pawn if your opponent gets competition, meaning if they can get like a rook to the 7th or they get very good attacking chances, this is not a good pawn. But here I found that this was actually a good pawn for me this time. So that's just one thing you should be thinking about. Make sure that when you do win your pawns, it's actually good for you. Bishop takes on g4, and here that they missed that after knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, yes, the bishop won the pawn and attacks my rook, but they also opened up my rook to now attack on b2, plus my bishop is attacking on e2. Well, first things first, I don't want to lose my rook, so let's move it and make a threat. I played rook e to c8, attacking the bishop, and here the bishop went ahead and played back to a4. Definitely not the best move here. And here again is another choice. Which pawn do you take? Literally 3 different pawns are hanging here, but which one is the best? e2, c4, or b2? This didn't take me long to realize the best move. Which one is it? Here, of course, we take on b2 with the rook. Again, it's not about winning the pawn as much as getting the activity. Here we have a rook on the 7th or the 2nd rank, and this is typically worth the pawn because this is why they're called pigs on the 7th. Here, they're going to eat up all the pawns. So here I got plenty of activity. I'm going to be making lots of different moves, lots of different captures here pretty soon. Well, they tried to save the e2 pawn, so they played pawn to f3. That's okay. My bishop wants to move anyways. Bishop to e6. Now, for sure, the c4 pawn will be hanging. Rook e1 was played to cover the pawn. And how do we take the c4 pawn? Bishop takes or rook takes. Here again, I played for activity, and I played rook takes on c4. I did see my opponent can play bishop b3 here, but this I'm not too worried about. If they do play bishop b3, that's just going to be activating more trades. At this point, trades are good for me. I'm now up a few good pawns, and, well, trades are part of the rules. When you're up in material, make trades. It makes the endgames easier to win. The easiest endgames to win are king and pawn, and that's exactly what I'm going to be aiming for. Bishop b3 got played. Let's keep the rook active. Rook to c3, again attacking on b3, and if the bishop moves away, well, then I'll take this pawn on a2. Bishop takes. King takes. I wanted to keep my pawn structure all the same. And here my opponent played king f2, and this makes sense. Remember, king should be heading toward the center, and it also defends the e2 pawn so that now this rook can become active. Now here again, we have gone into a new part of the game, which is double rook endgames. And I don't know if you've heard the saying, all rook endgames are drawn. You do have to be very careful with these transitions. Again, I'm playing against a stronger opponent, an international master, and they definitely know a lot of the theoretical endgame draws here. So what's the plan here? Well, anytime you win a pawn, that means you should be getting a pass pawn or a candidate pass pawn. For those that don't know, a pass pawn is a pawn that has no pawn in front of him. Right now, I do not have any pass pawns because there's always a pawn that's going to be stopping one of mine. But here, because I've won a few pawns, I have at least some candidate pass pawns. A pawn that is not passed, but it doesn't have any pawn in front of it, but a pawn from the side can capture it. For instance, I have the G pawn, which is a candidate pass pawn. No pawn in front of it, but it can still be stopped. And then I also have the D pawn over here. Again, a candidate pass pawn. It can be pushed forward, but it can still be stopped by another pawn. So anytime you win a pawn, just know you should be getting at least a candidate pass pawn. Here I'm going to get a little bit of activity, but I'm going to push my pawns forward. And where's the best place? Is it queenside, center, or the king side I should be pushing? Here I think best was to push in the center because I have these 3 pawns ready to push forward. So let's get to it. Here I started off with rook c to c2. Now this is a good move because it puts pressure on e2, meaning the rook has to stay, but also puts pressure on the a pawn. You want to keep your rooks as active as possible. So one little move right here. Here white went ahead and played pawn to a4. And here I started to push. I played pawn f5. A little bit more better technique would have been, a little bit better would have been rook a2, as this just looks to make a trade and also is going to put pressure on the a pawn. f5 is an okay move here too. King e3, the king is trying to get active over here. King to f6, again, like I said, I'm going to push these pawns forward. Passed pawns must be pushed. King over to d3, e5, king back, d5. My opponent does a very good strategy. He's just moving around right now. One of the tests that your opponent will give if they're a strong player is, can you make progress? Because if you just kind of move around and don't do anything, well, you can lose on time, like I said, or maybe you'll just make a mistake by yourself. So my opponent is just moving back and forth. A very good technique or strategy whenever you're in bad positions. Don't try to move around. Don't make more weaknesses by moving pawns. This is only going to help the attacker. King over to d3. And here, I did not play the best move. I played an okay move, but here I would have preferred to play pawn to d4 if I could have done that. Here, this is going to help make trades, but also threatens rook over to c3 for checkmate. And this is something I was looking for. I didn't find the right idea, so I played rook c4. And the idea is, again, to try and push the pawn forward, but and also maybe bring the rook back to attack on the a pawn again. Not the best move, but still a decent move altogether. Rook over to c1. White decides to try and make a trade so they can try to get the rook active. Very good move. Here it's worth a pawn to trade just so they can get activity. Because if you don't do anything and you just wait around, you will lose the game. Here I played rook b3 check, king to d2, and then I took the pawn on a4. Now this is a very bad endgame, but there's always going to be some kind of challenge your opponent's going to try to put for, at least if they're a good player. Here rook c6 check got played. I played king to g5 here, and the idea was to march my king up a little bit closer and help escort the pawns. Now you do have to be careful here. I was already looking at rook g1 check, which is not didn't get played, but it's something you have to look at. After rook check king over to f4, that they can't play something like e3 over here. So you're just looking for your activity, but again, the main idea is to try and push these pawns forward here. Anyways, back to the game. Instead of playing this check, he played rook over c1. Definitely looking to block and maybe get some activity. If they win a pawn here, once one pawn falls, another one will fall. I went ahead and played rook a2 check, rook over to c2, and then I played rook b to b2. Now here, I do not mind a trade, but I want to try and stay active with it and keep my rook on the second rank. And here you should be asking yourself, do you think it's a good idea to trade off one rook or keep both rooks on the board? Here, I think it's definitely better to trade off one pair of rooks because it becomes less active for your opponent to attack you. So you're stopping attacking chances against you. So here I'm going to make the trade either way. Rook takes on b2, rook takes on b2, king over to e1. And again, we're going to have to make progress here. What is the best pawn to push forward here? All right, guys, if you haven't already, don't forget to give us that like and subscribe. Liking is going to share this with more people. All right, so which pawn should we be pushing forward here? Well, after looking at this for a little bit, I definitely think the best move was to play pawn to a5. Remember, passed pawns must be pushed, and this is my only passed pawn right now. a5 was a decent move because I'm probably going to lose a pawn either way, but maybe d4 was a little bit better. d4 pushing just makes sure that this pawn is protected, and I'd rather lose the h pawn, which one of the threats was rook c7 here, than the d pawn, as this pawn is just, further up the board here. So I definitely think d4 was the best move here, but a5 is a decent move here too. Here my opponent played rook c5, and you have to ask yourself, it's a simple fork. You cannot save both pawns. Which one do you think is worth more here? Well, I always like to choose the best pawn, right, to save. And here I believe it's going to be the a pawn. Remember, pawn on the wing can be very good here. Yes, this pawn is good because it's connected with the other ones, but it's not a passed pawn because, well, this pawn could always stop it. This is the passed pawn, so we want to keep this guy running forward. Basically, what we're going to do is push the pawn as far forward as possible. The rook will have to come to defend, and then the rook will then have to stay there to defend. And then I can just do a regular king and pawn endgame here, so that, well, I have more pawns, and this king is very weak. My rook will stay active, and this rook will be tied down to defending. So very basic technique here. a4, let's push it. Rook takes. Pawn to a3. Rook back to a5. Notice taking here would not be the best move here, as now I just play rook b1 check. King up, and now there's no good way to stop the pawn. a2. White's going to go ahead and have to sacrifice the rook here. So rook a5 got played. Pawn to a2. Now the rook is tied down. It has to keep defending this square or this pawn. And now the threat is rook b1 check, so I can push the pawn forward. My opponent saw this, of course, and played king f2. All right, so the first phase has been done. Now we need to push our pawns forward and see if we can maybe create a second weakness in the position. Either maybe the e pawn or maybe try to create another pass pawn. So let's keep making progress. King f4. Here my plan was to play e4, e3 if available. This will bring the king back to the first rank, where I can do my check and then get a queen. Or if the rook moves over, well, I can win another pawn, which again will give me a pass pawn. My opponent played what I thought they'd play. They played rook a4 check. Perfect. How did you know I wanted to push my pawn forward? e4 got played. Pawn takes, pawn takes. Now I can't push the pawn forward yet because it's in a pin, but we're getting into what's called the zugzwang position, which is where any move that you make will be losing. So my opponent played pawn to h4. They're running out of moves at this point. Simple chess. Pawn to h6. I'm going to play pawn g5 and then make a new pass pawn, and then I'm going to push it. Once you show your opponent that you have all the best plans or the winning plans, they are more likely to resign in positions because you're just showing them, hey, this is how you win the game. Rook over to a3 got played, stopping my e3 pawn yet again. I mean, I could play e3 here, check, and the rook cannot take because, well, if it takes, then I make a queen. But no need to rush forward. Again, I have all the cards in this position, so I can play it nice and simple. Here I just went ahead and played pawn to g5, and, well, my opponent took, and then just resigned. I mean, at this point, there really is no good move here. The king will have to move. They can't move to the back row. Why? If they move to the back row, rook b1 check, and then we can make a queen. If they move to the side, rook takes on e2 check. I win another pawn, and now I have two new pass pawns. And if the rook moves off this third rank, and let's just say goes down for a check over here, well, then I get to go e3 check and either, again, take on e2 or rook b1 check. Again, all variations are going to be good for me at this point. And, of course, the rook cannot move anywhere to the side because then I just make a queen. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this. This was some endgame planning of how to win and create plans in your endgames. Hope you guys enjoy it. We'll see you in the next video.